Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome into the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, April 20th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by Bucknuts contributor and former Ohio University defensive back Jonah Booker. J-Book, how are things in the Phoenix, Arizona area this morning, my man?
I can't complain. It's starting to get a little hot, so just trying to stay cool out here in the valley.
One of the few times all year the weather's nicer in Ohio than maybe down there, since we're dealing with like 70-degree weather, and you guys are probably getting close to 100 down there, but you have it pretty nice for most of the year. All right, let's get right into it. Yesterday I posted a question on the front row message board. What is your biggest question or concern regarding the 2016 Ohio State Buckeyes? We had a lot of responses. You know, it was interesting to me. The most common response was offensive line. Obviously, no one is worried about Pat Elflein. No one's worried about Billy Price. I mean, maybe some people are worried about Billy Price. I think he's going to be very good. But I think people are pretty confident in those two guys. You know, but there appears to be some concerns at right guard and right tackle from some fans. You know, right guard still unsettled, right tackle. We know Isaiah Prince is there, but Urban Meyer said he still needs to see some more out of him. They seem pretty happy with Jamarco Jones. So anyway, J-Book, not shocking that fans would mention the offensive line, but I did find it interesting that O-line seems to be the biggest concern from Buckeye fans, at least among our subscribers.
The offensive line, for me, that's one of my big issues, Dave. I'm a little concerned about that. As you mentioned, the interior guys at right guard, that's up for grabs, and they absolutely got dominated in that spring game. Every time the quarterbacks pretty much dropped back to pass, the defensive line was living in the backfield. So it's going to be interesting. They are replacing some veterans there. I actually think Prince is going to get pushed once Malcolm Pridgeon, the JUCO kid, gets on campus. But like you said, Urban Meyer said he needs to see a little bit more out of him. What's Billy Price going to do this year? He had a step back last year. Is he going to bounce back and get back to that form that we saw during the national championship run? I like what I'm seeing out of Jamarco Jones, Elflein. He's a given All Big Ten, All American type player. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys do. That schedule is going to be jumping on them fairly quick there. So it's not a lot of time for that offensive line to gel.
J-Book, another common response was offensive play calling. A lot of fans are concerned about offensive play calling, according to our thread on the front row message board. Now, so I wonder, you know, and give me your thoughts on this. Did the Buckeyes find the perfect mix the last two games of the season against Michigan and Notre Dame? Or were the first 11 games a better indicator? Obviously, 2 games, small sample size. I like to think they found their groove there. And furthermore, Urban Meyer is really the offensive coordinator of this team. I remind everybody of that. He is really the offensive coordinator, and I know last year was a mess, the first 11 games, but a lot of fans are concerned about play calling on offense. Your reaction to that, J-Book, do you agree with that?
There is a concern there, but if you look at what the play calling looked like the last couple of games, those guys were putting up 40-plus points a game. So are they going to get back to that form? My concern when it comes to the play calling is how many times they're running J.T. Barrett. Down the stretch, yeah, they put up 40-plus points against Michigan and Notre Dame, but it required Barrett to run the ball 20-plus times a game. Now, here's a guy who's taken a beating throughout his Ohio State career. I don't think J.T. Barrett can hold up throughout an entire season, a potential playoff run, running the football 20-plus times a game. So they're going to have to find some type of balance. So that is a concern as far as how are they going to balance out the play calling, because you can't have your quarterback continuously to take a beating, a guy who has shown to be, you know, not somewhat injury prone, but a guy that has missed significant amount of time due to injuries.
Wide receivers were also prominently mentioned in the thread, Jonah. People, I think they recognize there's a lot of talent there, but they're concerned about the inexperience. Now, Corey Smith will be back as a sixth-year senior. He missed spring. Noah Brown was out during spring. And Noah Brown was set to be a starter last year, and he's coming back from a broken leg. Corey Smith also coming back from a broken leg. They have Paris Campbell. They have a lot of guys. Torrance Gibson, Austin Mack, Terry McLaurin, James Clark. But people are concerned, and I can see why. What are your thoughts on people being concerned about the wide receivers?
I actually like this wide receiver group. They're extremely athletic. Young, yes. Raw, yes. You can check those boxes. But I really like what I'm seeing from those guys. Now, my response can also tie to the concerns in regards to the play calling. Because if you look at a guy in Torrance Gibson. This is a guy I had said on the message board yesterday. He's a guy that you would say that's twitched up, meaning that he's extremely fluid. The guy is physically gifted, explosive, and you saw the little jet sweep to him to get him into the end zone in the spring game. But how would they use those type of thoroughbreds like Torrance Gibson? Hopefully they don't use them like they did Braxton Miller, where it was consistently wildcat to the left, wildcat to the right, where the guy wasn't really getting the ball in space and being able to make those plays that we're used to seeing. So Torrance Gibson is a guy that I absolutely think could be a big difference maker on this team, but how would they use him? Because if they're going to use him like Miller, then it's going to be a waste. How are they going to use a Paris Campbell, who I think is extremely athletic, when the ball's in his hand? You saw what he could do in the spring game, and then Curtis Samuel's back, Dontre Wilson. There's a lot of bodies. How's that rotation? But overall, I'm very excited about that group because I think they're extremely talented.
Jonah, another position group that wasn't mentioned quite as prominently as the other ones, but still had a few mentions, was defensive tackle. Again, I don't think this is at the forefront of their concerns. I did see a few mentions about defensive tackle. Mike Hill, Tracy Sprinkle coming in there as the starters. I think people feel good about those guys. The depth behind them. I think they have so many guys, a lot of redshirt freshmen. I think they're going to find a couple good backups to go with the starters. You're talking about guys like Devon Hamilton, Ja'Shawn Cornell, Draymond Jones, Robert Landers. I mean, they redshirted 5 defensive tackles last year because moving Jones and Cornell from defensive end to defensive tackle, they really redshirted 5 defensive tackles last year. Josh Alibi being the other one in there. Now he missed a lot of spring. I've heard Alibi's in the doghouse. I heard he was injured, so maybe it's a little bit of both. But do you agree that defensive tackle is a concern when you examine the 2016 Buckeyes?
I don't agree with that at all. In fact, I posted on the message board yesterday that I think this is the best defensive line that Urban Meyer has had since he's been at Ohio State. You're talking about 12 deep potentially on the defensive line. And when you talk about the defensive tackle, Mike Hill, he's going to start with Tracy Sprinkle, and I really like the way Sprinkle has parlayed that Notre Dame performance into an excellent spring. And then Davon Hamilton, my goodness, we talked about him last week. This guy is cornbread thick in the middle, and he absolutely dominated that spring game. And then Ja'Shawn Cornell, he's a guy that reminds me of Adolphus Washington. He was a big-time defensive end recruit coming in. He got big, so they slid him inside. He's extremely hard to block with that explosive first step. Draymond Jones, another name that Urban Meyer said has looked really good this spring that dominated. And you have those 4. You have Rob Landers, who's probably the 5th guy coming in there. The question mark is out on Munger if he's ever going to be able to come back battling those blood clots. But I like where this group is headed. I think they're extremely talented. Along with your 2 starters, I think that the next 3 rotation is going to be Hamilton, Cornell, and Jones.
Pretty solid backups right there. Yeah, that's the thing. They have so much talent there. I agree with you completely on that. So we talked about the fans and the message board thread, their main concerns. What's your biggest concern? When you look at this team, what's your biggest concern or biggest question you have when you look at this team?
My biggest question mark is the youth. How are those guys going to react once adversity hits? The talent on this team is through the roof. It's something like 52, 53, 4 and 5-star recruits that will be on the roster come this fall. So this team is loaded talent-wise, but they're very inexperienced. Once the going gets tough, how's this team going to react in Norman, Oklahoma once a turnover happens or a penalty sets them back or a touchdown gets called back? How's this team going to react? Because you look at that schedule, Athlon Sports had this schedule ranked as the 6th toughest in college football this year. So you have 10 teams that made a bowl, 3 teams that won their conference championship on the schedule. It was announced yesterday that Penn State game is going to be a whiteout. That's not surprising. So you're probably going to have back-to-back night games up at Camp Randall and at Happy Valley, along with a road test at Michigan State. That's no easy schedule. This is the toughest schedule since Urban Meyer's been at Ohio State, and this is probably the youngest team that he's going to field since he's been at Ohio State. So that's my biggest question mark is how would these guys perform and how would they react once adversity strikes?
My biggest concern, I think, is depth at corner. If Marshawn Lattimore doesn't stay healthy, I mean, the Buckeyes are going to be down to just Garyon Conley, who I do think is a future first-round pick, Denzel Ward, who I'm very high on, and Damon Arnett, who's really coming on. But again, if they lose Marshawn Lattimore, they're down to Conley, Ward, and Arnett. Really is the only viable corners, not counting any incoming freshmen. Maybe Jordan Fuller can play right away, but I'm not going to count on any true freshmen. That's pretty razor-thin depth there, J-Book. And we know Lattimore has those chronic hamstring injuries. And, and obviously Damon Webb moving from corner to safety, Eric Glover-Williams moving from corner to safety. They lost a couple good corner prospects there. I'm concerned about depth at corner. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see that, especially with Lattimore, because at any given moment, those hamstrings can pop or they can strain or pull. Ward, I think, is going to be locked in there in case Lattimore gets hurt, but they also like to use their cornerbacks in the nickelback role, which at that point would bump Arnett up. So I can see what your concerns are there. Fingers crossed that Lattimore can stay healthy. I'm not sure what they're going to get out of those freshmen. Josh Norwood, I don't know if he's ready to go. Yeah, you saw him in the spring game. He had a couple pass interference penalties on him, so I'm not sure how great they feel about Norwood, but I can definitely understand your concerns with the cornerback position.
Well, J-Book, thanks for sharing some knowledge this morning. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Dave.
Also, thanks to the listeners. I hope everyone has a great day. Buckeye swag, please. Best damn band in the land.